if you're not a believer? Is it blue like the sky? And does it really reach that high? What color is love?
Terry Callier was an American guitarist, singer, and songwriter who originated from Chicago. In 1962, he released his first single through the Chess label, and he started performing in folk clubs in and around Chicago. It took until 1968 for his first album to be released. This was followed by a trio of critically acclaimed but commercially unsuccessful albums between 1972 and 1973. And he released 2 more albums in the late 70s and toured until 1983, when he gave up music for personal reasons. He then commenced to learn computer programming and got a job at the University of Chicago and started studying sociology. In the late 80s, he started to get recognition again. So he had never been particularly successful during this first stage of his career, and not particularly well known, apparently. But especially in UK clubs, DJs started playing some of his tracks. To the extent that in the 90s, he started gigging in the UK again in his vacation time from his job. And in the late 90s, then staged a comeback and went professional again. He released 5 more albums since then and died in 2012. So, as I've implied, his initial phase, he was very much unknown during that time, but is much more highly regarded now than he was at that point. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the 3rd album by Terry Callier. So it was in his initial stint of being a musician. And it was the middle one in the trilogy that came out quite close together, that were all produced by a guy called Charles Stepney. So as always, or almost always, I've listened to this album twice, and in between I did some reading. Particularly, I tend to use Wikipedia as my big source because there's lots of useful information there. Now, apparently, Craig Charles, who people in Britain will know, or many of them, had a TV show about funk, or might have been on the radio anyway, and he listed this as a funk album, and I really disagree with that. But I'm not going to go out on a limb and say one particular genre that I think it is. So it starts with kind of, the first track opens with a kind of almost Simon and Garfunkel folk feel on a guitar, acoustic guitar, and then it goes on to work through a range of different styles. So I would say that some of this is folky jazz. Folky rock with a jazz influence. There are some extended passages. There's bits of mild psychedelia. It reminded me a bit of, in some ways, Jimi Hendrix, but also Jefferson Airplane, but not as psychedelic as that, but occasional bits that were in that sort of direction. There's what I think of as being a kind of a particular San Francisco sound around that time, which is this kind of jazz folk rock thing. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in this, so it's just my opinion that I formed. And the album that I've got, that I've had for years, that I picked up on a random whim in a record shop many years ago, was by a pairing called John Mark and Johnny Armand. And they were from that kind of area and were singing similar to this, more mellow at times than this. What else do I want to say? Oh, yes, there's at least one track, and there are certainly other places that remind me strongly of chamber pop, of the kind of style of Scott Walker. So it's kind of big songs with a huge orchestral backing, that kind of thing. And then there's a few tracks that I would probably describe as being soul in there. So really it's its own thing. It's a mixture. It kind of moves from style to style quite a bit. I'm going to pull out some particular songs. So it starts really strong with the track Dancing Girl. It's a multi-part song, keeps changing styles. I love these kinds of songs, what I think of as a suite song, suite, so like a musical suite. This ends with a little bit of music and a little bit of singing. So the singers, I saw a dream last night, bright like a falling star, and I felt like I recognised that from somewhere, but I can't put my finger on it. So if anybody hears it and recognises that bit and knows where I might have heard it from, then please do tell me in the comments box. I'd love to know. Moving on, the other track that I really like is You're Gonna Miss Your Candyman, which I thought was similarly excellent. There's a track, I'd Rather Be With You, which this was the one that most strongly reminded me of Scott Walker's stuff around the same sort of time, or early Elton John, maybe, that kind of big ballady song. Just As Long As We're in Love is a soul song with orchestra. The title track, What Colour Is Love, sounds more like a jazz standard. I felt like it was a weaker song. Actually, uncharacteristically, I felt there were some tuning issues in his singing in the song, and the words were kind of cheesy, I felt. You Don't Care is an unusual song for the album in that it's a guitar instrumental with quite a lot of backing, and then backing vocals as well. And it's fairly simple guitar stuff. So that's just picking out a few of the songs. There's more songs on there as well. His voice, let's talk about his voice. He's got a really nice, strong, expressive, but at the same time fairly fragile sounding voice. He sounds vulnerable. And the person that he reminded me most of in his the tone of his voice was Nina Simone, strangely, because he's a guy and Nina Simone's a woman, but there's a very similar kind of timbre to the voices, I thought. Nina Simone's maybe slightly more strident, and Terry Callier's a bit more kind of mellow sounding. Maybe he could pull it out if he wanted to. So what did I think? Overall, well, I really enjoyed the songs that I wouldn't have described as soul. Really, and that's not because I don't like soul, it's because I was less taken with these particular soul songs. They felt more formulaic, and they felt less, it almost felt like he was less engaged with those songs. I felt like the kind of folky rock stuff was where he was strongest. Definitely, as I said before, Dancing Girl and You're Gonna Miss Your Candyman are my two favourites out of the album. And if it had all been as strong as those two songs, this score would have been in the 8s easily. As it is, it's I'm afraid the others have pulled it down quite a bit. So that's my opinion. As always, I'd love to know yours, so please do leave a comment in the comments. And that's it from me for now.
I saw a dream last night, bright like a falling star, and the sources of light seem so near, yet so far. I thought I was in